Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, Tata, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about it's a phenomenon in Australia, but I think it's happening all over the Western world. It's been reported in the media, which surprised me. It's probably the only sort of centre-right media outlet left in Australia, but it's reported that over 50% of migrants cannot get a driver's license. This is in the state of New South Wales, but which is like where Sydney, the city of Sydney is. Cannot get a driver's license because their English is non-existent. They're unable to even sit for the test, let alone go for the driver's license. So their English is so bad they can't even sit for the test. So now there's another group between 35 and 40%, depending on whose numbers you sort of want to go on, and their English is the equivalent of sort of a 4-year-old or 5-year-old at best, and they're again not competent to really sit the test. Now those are the ones that are allowed to sit the test, but they've decided to start failing them because you can't have, or so it's viewed, the insurance companies are complaining about all these incompetent drivers on the road. Now, the harder you make it for them to get licenses, they then do as they do in the United States. They just get a buddy to sit for the test, and then they say they're the buddy, and then they drive around illegally anyway, which is obviously an undesirable thing. So trying to get the balance between making the license attainable and not having people go into the underground of one actual license is shared by 20 people. And when you get the Amazon deliveries and the food deliveries, DoorDash, pizza delivery, whatever the case may be, the companies that do this aren't really that fussy, and often, if not all the time, these migrants, let's call them third world peasants, the globalization crowd, they are in big demand, and they go through labour hire firms. That was the thing I was thinking. They go through labour hire firms, and the labour hire firms just claim, Abdul's got a license. Yeah, no problem. When Abdul actually doesn't have a license, Abdul couldn't get a license. They have to use translation programs for everything, language translation programs. Now, the Australian government claims that only people with competent English are allowed to come to Australia as migrants. That clearly is a grotesque untruth. And also it doesn't apply to people, things like family reunion or students and things like that. They can come in without English, or again, it's an online test and they get someone else to do it for them, and they come in anyway, even though they can't speak a word of English. I don't understand why, if someone's has got a visa to come to Australia or anywhere in the West on the basis they speak competent English, and then it turns out they can't speak a word of English, they should be their visa should immediately be cancelled and they should be deported. I don't know why they're allowed to stay. And the amount of people that can't even sit for the test, their English is so bad because you can't do it all online. You have to physically front up. And the amount of fraud is astonishing. Also, the labour hire companies and so on, they try and bribe the driving test examiners to get their people through. Sometimes, I don't know how widespread it is. It must be pretty widespread. Sometimes they get caught out, and sometimes they get caught doing bribes. But again, the penalties are almost non-existent. These people they're not deported or not having their visas cancelled or anything like that. Even though they may be on a temporary visa or a student visa or a short-term work visa. Anyway, now, why is it that so many people that can't speak a lick of English are allowed to go? They're third world peasants. Now, as it turns out, they're illiterate in their own language, let alone English. So this idea that these people who are illiterate in their own language can suddenly speak good English and will acquire it quickly is simply nonsense. So there's all sorts of software programs they use that someone in a central office will put in the address they have to go to, these illiterate peasants, if they manage to somehow scam a license, and then they get in their own language, they get the the GPS telling you turn left here, go right there, and so on. So that's a level of automation that can make an illiterate peasant somehow functional there. I don't know whether that's a good idea or not. But again, if the responsibility falls disproportionately on white people can't get away with it. So why should they? White people have to actually pass the test. Why should non-white people be given a free pass, or at least given a lowered standard that they have to meet? Now, there's a lot of pressure from the courier companies and the like, leaning on the politicians to say, listen, can you just go easy on these people? Who cares if they can't speak English and that type of stuff? You brought them in, you brought them to Australia, so why give them a hard time when they get here? So there's all that sort of going on, but it goes to just illustrate how the people that are being brought into the West aren't the best of what's on offer in these third world countries. They're not the doctors or the engineers and so on. These are illiterate, IQ 70 peasants, and they're being brought in en masse all over the West. And the idea that between half and 2/3 of them, their English is so piss poor they can't even sit for the test, let alone take it and fail. And it's really an indictment, I think, of the whole idea of this mass migration and the globalization. Bring in good quality people, why not? But these illiterate peasants, you've got to be kidding. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.